Like this film, the Clock Tower finale is held up very well. The tension builds through a series of near misses, before and even after the lightning strike. To the few who've claimed that this film feels like a movie made for TV, you probably feel that way because you watched it on one, which would affect your experience. But revisiting an earlier point, if you were old enough or lucky enough to have seen this in a proper theater with full, rich sound, I doubt you'd feel that way. Because Back to the Future was decidedly immersive and cinematic, and its finale is a big, edge-of-your-seat experience. And even though most moviegoers probably suspected going in that things would work out for Marty just in the nick of time, pun intended, it still managed to hold the attention of the audience. And for what it's trying to accomplish, which was as zany and ambitious as Doc Brown, Back to the Future is pretty much perfect.
Flawless victory.
Great as all that stuff is, justice can't be done to this finale or film without discussing its dramatic and moral implications. One could fairly argue that the invention of a time machine is inherently irresponsible, and that some things ought not be invented, at least until we are morally mature enough to handle them. On the other hand, perhaps the invention of such things is the necessary catalyst to develop the type of moral maturity necessary to handle them. Sometimes it seems like our choices are somewhere between dull or treacherous, and a good case can be made for both. Should civilization go Amish or outer space? That's a big idea, a little too big to address here.
But that's just perfect for an Amish like me. You know I shun fancy things like electricity.
What we can do is look at how our characters behave in the face of the situations they've influenced and are influenced by. It isn't until 1985 that technology allows Doc to realize his 30-year conception for time travel. Accepting the fact that Doc has brought to life a potentially devastating invention, how does he proceed in light of it? Boldly, perhaps somewhat foolishly, but also, to his credit, as carefully as he can. It's certainly not his intention to do harm. And while intentions are not a moral get-out-of-jail-free card, they do matter. Doc's not a morally pure character, because human ambition seldom can be. But in the face of his ambition, we see him attempt to do the right things and contain the chaos that his invention will most certainly create. Doc's efforts in consideration of consequences provides Back to the Future a lot of its craziness and drama, plus some teachable moments for Marty. And Doc's repeated warnings to avoid influencing future events serve as additional examples of well-written exposition, this time relating to Doc's moral code.
You must not leave this house. You must not see anybody or talk to anybody. Anything you do could have serious repercussions on future events. Do you understand?
In terms of influencing Marty, Doc serves as a secondary father. After all, how can someone as defeated by life and his choices as George substantively demonstrate to Marty how to properly channel ambition and motive toward accomplishment? To show someone how to execute a controlled burn, you first have to have ignited your own fire. While Doc fills a void for Marty, Marty does the same for Doc, a person who, by account of this film, has committed himself doggedly to science. He has resources, but no wife or kid of his own. While their friendship is not a typical one, it's a healthy, mutually beneficial one. And we come to appreciate it more as the finale unfolds. Because like Marty, we too know how things will end for Doc if he doesn't get his hands on some Kevlar.
I'm going to be very sad to see you go. Just knowing that I'm going to be around to see 1985, that I'm going to succeed in this, that I'm going to have a chance to travel through time.
That's a hell of a scene. And again, it's earned. We have to see everything before this for this to be as emotionally impactful as it is. Keep in mind that this was merely the setup, and only Marty's first attempt to warn Doc, before he's forced to sit down and put it in writing. We know we're invested as an audience when we find ourselves quietly begging the characters to do the thing we want. If we were in Marty's shoes, we would certainly rationalize giving Doc the specifics of his future, right or wrong, and probably a fair bit of both. We'd want to tell Doc about his fate, because we'd fail to see the good of him checking out early, on his back, in a mall parking lot. And we'd really want Doc to hear us. While this is not a justification for a theoretical kind of cosmic interference, you can bet that most people, if they could help it, would certainly want to have their time and eat it too. The situation is still tenuous. Marty's hopes remain pinned on George following through on his part, not only to win Lorraine's respect, but to maintain her affection throughout the night. For Marty's timeline and lifeline to remain sufficiently intact, beating Biff isn't enough. George still has to seal the deal with Lorraine. But since he already took possibly the first bold step in his life, George, our new co-hero, now finds it easier to take the second. All right, George, we see you. Before Marty has to get to the clock tower, we're treated to a funny scene that only a time-traveling plot could give us. Generation gaps are always fun to look at, and this moment gives the movie a little relief before things ramp up again.
Lorraine.
Marty, that was very interesting music.
In this brief scene, by the gymnasium stairwell, notice how Crispin Glover captures George's new confidence. This is good directing and skillful natural acting. McFly is a little bit cooler, and now stands a little bit taller. Emma Thompson is funny and also subtly great in this moment. George and Lorraine already look like a married couple, and the audience knows that at least this part of the mission has been accomplished. It's a nice touch. Check out George's mature, confessional tone as he thanks Marty.
Oh, Marty, I want to thank you for all your good advice. I'll never forget it.
Right, George. Well, good luck, you guys.
George has literally grown up in the span of a few dramatic minutes, and somehow it's totally convincing. We notice that the film and character's tonal gear has shifted, but we don't feel the jerk of a shoddy editor or lazy director who can't drive stick. In the hands of amateurs, this film could have easily felt disjointed. Confident that his future is secure with George and Lorraine, the race is on. And Doc is just as anxious for Marty to arrive as we are. Doc goes over the final step for Marty's trip back, and Marty slips him the letter about his future. Once more, Doc refuses to hear Marty's revelation and makes a final proclamation about this kind of meddling.
What's the meaning of this?
We'll find out in 30 years!
It's about the future, isn't it? It's information
Wait a
about
minute.
the future! I refuse to accept the responsibility!
But Doc, and especially Marty, don't have time to worry about the future. They have their hands filled with the present. And just when you think things can't get any tighter, a loose branch and Stormwind complicate matters further. The sequence of Doc attempting to reconnect the untethered power line in time for Marty's exit launch is well cut and conceived. It's a fantastically tense, straightforward scene, while the practical and special effects are solid. It's the substance behind the situation that makes it work. My suspicion that this scene was a call-up of the Harold Lloyd 1923 silent black and white Safety Last was confirmed by a 2020 article by Tom Chang on bleedingcool.com. The coincidence of two men, last name Lloyd, hanging from clock hands was not lost on me. But Harold and Christopher are not related. After plenty of struggle on the tower ledge, Doc pulls enough slack to reconnect the line at the top, but must reconnect the now broken ground level connection. Meanwhile, after getting the stalled DeLorean to start with a timely headbutt to the steering wheel, Marty, with pedal to the floor, is heading in hot and shooting for exactly 88 miles per hour. With seconds to spare, Doc, wearing thick, insulating gloves, basically ziplines down the cable to the open connection just as lightning strikes. And Emmett's expression here reflects the delight of the audience, at least the folks that allowed themselves to get carried away on this ride. But the work still isn't done. And while Marty smartly set the time circuits to give him an extra 10 minutes to warn Doc about the bad guys heading his way, of course, after re-entry, the icy car won't start, leaving Marty to get to the Twin Pines Mall on foot. And we sense that, for this go-around, Marty's not going to make it in time. After sprinting for who knows how far, an exhausted Marty arrives at Twin Pines, just in time to witness the whole tragedy once more. Since by this time in the film, 1 hour, 43 minutes, and 20 seconds to be precise, or 1:33 a.m. Pacific Standard Time to be cute, the audience has come to know Doc Brown better than they did before we landed in 1955, which makes the second occurrence of his demise that much harder to accept.
In about 30 years?
I hope so.
Don't worry!
And if you felt like this kid did back in '85, you were hoping beyond hope that somehow Doc was all right. This story cared enough to make you care too. So when Doc gives a couple of blinks and slowly comes to, we realize there's been a favorable disturbance in the Force, if you don't mind yet another Star Wars reference. The reveal is logical and emotionally satisfying.
You're alive. How did you know? I never got a chance to tell you. What about all that talk about screwing up future events, the space-time continuum?
Well, I figured.
There's an important scene where we learn that 1955 Doc has an inkling of the trouble awaiting him in 1985. It's when Marty walks in on Doc watching the video footage of his trial time travel run. Before he notices Marty enter the garage, Doc is caught playing and replaying the part where the tape stops, and where his clock will stop, figuratively speaking. It's reasonable to assume that the man smart enough to build a time machine is also smart enough to understand what the footage implies, with or without help from Marty. Since Doc has already sniffed the truth, with each and every unsuccessful emotional attempt from Marty to share the specifics, he moves Doc's suspicions closer to certainty. Going by his own hypothesis, Doc might suspect that his suspicions are themselves a sufficient enough change to the space-time continuum, and that everything else is a wash. If we apply the butterfly effect of chaos theory to Doc's dilemma, we concede that time travel itself is a disruptive, transformative occurrence. In other words, there's nothing Doc Brown can do in time or time travel that will not impact the future, and in a somewhat unpredictable manner. It then reduces to a question of quantity and quality of change, which brings us back to the familiar ground of value judgments and responsibility. Time travel, if possible, doesn't eliminate action and reaction. That's the reality we have now. But time travel does change the nature and magnitude of it. Cause and effect are still in play, but effects are now potentially impermanent. Back to the Future feeds us scenes that show Doc reacting to the happenings around him, like an out-of-control experiment unfolding before his eyes, which it is. And at times, we witness Doc figuring out that the kind of time travel he's created is necessarily disruptive. Maybe at some point or points during Marty's visit, Doc comes to appreciate that once the Pandora's box of time travel has been opened, all that can be done is to make the most responsible choices, but to realize that even a choice to do nothing is also a choice with consequences that may not be so easy to determine. The second time Marty reunites with Doc at the mall, Doc has had 30 years to consider the consequences, and perhaps the folly in believing that doing nothing, particularly in an already modified timeline, is automatically better than doing something. Was returning to the scene with a bulletproof vest a selfish choice? Definitely. Was it strictly selfish, or even destructive? That's harder to say, and makes for great conversation. But when Doc utters these words,
Well, I figured, what the hell?
it makes perfect sense. I know I'm not alone when I say that I really miss seeing this kind of creativity in film. A ton of credit must be given to Robert Zemeckis, Bob Gale, and their entire crew for this movie. In July, Back to the Future celebrates its 40th anniversary of release. While the current choices of new films are seldom this good, any form of art, particularly film, is a time machine of its own. And that means we're not limited to the mediocre present, because good stories outlast their time. As film enthusiasts, we're fortunate that this little gem from 1985 will always be here for us to go back to. I hope to see you in the future. Thanks for listening.